Hey everybody, welcome back. We're diving into a pretty deep question today. What does it really mean to love God? And we're going to go past just saying the words and really look at how love shows up in our actions.
I like it.
Our source material is this Christian podcast. It's called Do You Really Love God? Unpacking the Truth Beyond Words.
Catchy.
And our mission today is to really help you think about how this whole idea of active love plays out in your own life.
Yeah, that's a great goal. I think this podcast really makes us think about that. It challenges us to look at whether our lives really show the love we say we have for God.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to say the words, but are we actually living it out?
Definitely. And the podcast jumps right into this thought-provoking question, do you really love God? It's like a reality check right from the beginning.
It really is like, whoa, okay, got to think about this.
Right, and then they use a super powerful example to show what they mean. The sacrifice Jesus made on the cross.
Oh, yeah.
This ultimate act of love wasn't just talk. It was a selfless action that changed the world.
Okay, that example really gets to me, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not just about this one big historical event, right?
Right.
The podcast connects this idea of action-based love to Scripture, verses like Matthew 16.24, where Jesus talks about denying yourself and carrying your cross to follow him.
You got it.
Now, for those who might not be familiar with that verse, what's Jesus saying there?
He's basically saying following him means sacrifice. You got to put his teachings above your own wants and desires. It's about making your actions match your beliefs.
I see it. So we're seeing this theme pop up.
Yeah.
Love's not passive.
Yeah.
It takes action, sacrifice, and be willing to actually live out your faith.
Yeah, and this reminds me of those amazing stories about the apostles, Peter and Paul, that the podcast highlights.
Oh, yeah?
Their transformations are like perfect examples of what this kind of radical love can look like.
They're great examples, so let's break them down a bit. We've got Peter, who at first was so scared he denied even knowing Jesus.
Yeah.
But then he goes on to become a bold leader in the early church.
Yeah, it's incredible. Right. And then you have Paul, who was literally out there persecuting Christians before he had this life-changing encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus.
That's right.
Talk about a turnaround. He went from trying to silence Christ's message to becoming one of the most powerful voices spreading it.
I mean, it wasn't just like a surface level change.
No, it was a complete transformation of their hearts and minds.
I think what's so powerful about these stories is that they show how much love for God can lead to real personal growth.
Totally.
It's not about just feeling good or going through the motions.
Nope.
It's about letting your faith completely change you from the inside out.
And what I find especially inspiring about Peter's story is that it shows us that even those who mess up can find redemption and become amazing examples of faith.
Yeah.
His fear at the beginning is something a lot of people can relate to, but his transformation shows that we all have the potential for growth and courage inside us.
Yeah, that's a good point. It gives us hope.
Right. Like we don't have to be perfect to experience this kind of transformative love. We just have to be open to it.
Open to it.
Now, looking at Paul, what's interesting is that his story makes us check our own prejudices and biases. You know?
Yeah.
If someone like him who was actively against Christianity could have such a radical change, it makes you wonder what's possible for anyone who opens their heart to the message of love and forgiveness.
Wow. That's a really powerful way to look at it.
Right.
It's like if Paul can go from persecutor to peacemaker, what kind of change is possible within each of us?
Exactly. While we're talking about these transformations, the podcast brings up this idea of proof.
Proof?
Yeah, not proof like in science, but more like how our lives show what we believe. Do our actions match what we say we believe?
Oh, I get it. It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
The podcast is really saying that true love for God is more than just saying the right things.
Right.
It's about living it out in a way that other people can see.
Yeah, they challenge us to think about this. Like,
Yeah.
would the people around us see our faith in how we treat them, the choices we make, and just how we live in the world?
That's a good point. And to be honest, it makes me a little uncomfortable.
Really?
Yeah, because it's easy to get comfy in our faith and just go through the motions without really looking at how it's affecting what we do.
I think that happens to a lot of people, but the podcast isn't trying to make us feel bad. It's more like a gentle reminder to think about whether our actions line up with what we believe, and it's actually empowering.
How so?
Because it reminds us that we have the power to show our love for God in real ways.
Okay, I see what you mean. So instead of feeling burdened by this idea of proof,
Right.
we can see it as a chance to show our love through what we do.
Exactly. Think about it. We can make choices that reflect God's teachings. use our skills and resources to help others, and share messages of hope and grace with people around
I
us.
like that.
Those are all actions that prove our faith in a positive way.
So it's like we have this awesome opportunity to be living, breathing examples of God's love
Yeah.
that feels like a pretty big responsibility, though.
It is, but I also think it's a
Yeah.
privilege
So
to think that what we do can spread out and affect not just our own lives, but other people's lives too. That's pretty inspiring.
that is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the need for action and this idea of proof.
Right.
But I'm glad that this podcast doesn't just leave us hanging.
Yeah.
They actually give us some real guidance, what they call a call to action on how to live out our faith more on purpose.
And the guidance is super practical. They talk about how important daily devotion is, spending time in prayer, and finding community with other believers.
You know what's interesting to me is that the podcast doesn't present these things as just another set of rules or things we have to do.
Right.
It's more about finding ways to connect more deeply with our faith and making it a bigger part of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about finding ways to nourish our spirits, make time for reflection, and build connections with others who share our beliefs and can support us. It also talks about finding ways to share our faith with others, not in a pushy way, but in a way that comes from love and compassion.
I really like that idea that faith isn't a solo thing.
Yeah.
I know for me personally, having a community of people who think like I do has been so important to my own spiritual journey.
It's so true that sense of community offers support, accountability, and encouragement. It helps us stay strong in our faith, especially when things are tough. And it also gives us chances to learn from others and share what we've been through.
So if we think about it, we have this kind of framework here. Love is shown through action. Actions prove our beliefs. And we have these concrete steps we can take, like daily devotion, prayer, and community, to grow a deeper, more active faith.
Yeah. But the main takeaway, I think, is that it's not about checking off boxes or following rules. It's about letting our love for God affect everything in our lives, from our personal relationships to our work to how we interact with the world around us.
It's about letting that love be the driving force behind what we do, what we say, and the choices we make every day.
And when we look at faith that way, it becomes less about obligation and more about joy. It's less about what we should do and more about what we naturally want to do because our hearts are full of love and thankfulness. It's about finding that sweet spot where faith isn't something we force, but something that flows naturally from within.
Ooh, I love that phrase, effortless expression of love. That really speaks to me. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to turn things over to you, the listener.
Okay.
Think about this call to action. We've been talking about daily devotion, prayer, community, sharing your faith. Which of these really stand out to you?
Yeah.
What are you already doing well in these areas, and where could you use a little more encouragement or support?
Take some time to think about these questions, and when we come back for the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore some even deeper insights and practical tips for actually putting these ideas into practice.
So as we've been exploring this idea of love in action, I keep thinking about the fruits of the Spirit we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's such a helpful and insightful way to see if love is really working in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. The fruits of the Spirit are found in Galatians 5:22-23, and they give us this awesome list of qualities: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
It's quite the list.
Right. They're like a mirror. They show us what's going on in our hearts.
And it's not about being perfect, is it?
Nope.
It's about growing and trying to develop these qualities in our everyday lives.
Exactly. And what's cool is that these fruits aren't just good for our spiritual lives. They affect every part of us.
I see that.
They change how we interact with our families, our coworkers, even people we don't know.
That's so true. Think about it. When you're coming from a place of love, joy, and peace, it changes the energy you bring to everything.
It's true. It's like you're radiating positivity.
You really are. And I think the podcast brings up a good point here. It challenges us to ask ourselves, if we've said we believe in Christ years ago, but our lives haven't changed, why is that?
That's a pretty powerful question.
It is.
But I think it gets to the core of the issue. True faith should change us. It should affect how we think, how we act, and ultimately how we live our lives.
So it's not about earning our salvation by doing good things, because we know that's a free gift through grace.
Right.
But it's about letting that grace flow through us and show up in real ways in the world.
Exactly. It's like we've been given this amazing gift, and now we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to use it to make a positive impact?
I love that it changes this whole idea of action into something exciting and full of potential.
Yeah.
It's like we get to team up with God to bring more love and light into the world.
And the great thing is there's no one right way to do it. We each have our own unique gifts, talents, and experiences
Yeah.
that we can use to express our love for God in ways that are true to who we are.
So this deep dive has really been about understanding that loving God is an active journey. It's about going beyond just words and letting our actions show what we believe.
Yeah.
It's about growing, changing, and finding those concrete ways to let our faith shine through in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to think about.
Okay.
Remember those fruits we discussed: love,
Yeah.
joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Which of these are most prominent in your life right now?
And are there any that you feel like you're maybe missing a bit? What small steps can you take today to cultivate those fruits more intentionally? How can you nurture your faith, deepen your connection with God, and let His love flow through you in everything you do?
Remember, it's not about becoming perfect overnight. It's about embracing the journey, taking one step at a time and letting the transformative power of love guide you every step of the way.
Great advice. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.